Everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight is Dao De Jing. We'll be covering verses 80 and 81. To read your favorite version of these verses, of verse 80 specifically, type exclamation point in the chat. Avanique.
Okay, so this is a Christian reading of Dao De Jing by John Mabry. So chapter 80. It is best to have small communities with few people. And although they have goods and equipment in abundance, few of them are even used. They have great love of life and are content to be right where they are. And although they have boats and carriages, there is no place they particularly want to go. And although they have access to weapons and machineries of war, they have no desire to show them off. Let people return to simplicity, working with their own hands. Then they will find joy in their food, beauty in their simple clothes, peace in their living, and fulfillment in their traditions. And although they live within sight of neighboring states, and their roosters and dogs are heard by one another, the people are content to grow old and die without having to see their neighbors' states.
Thank you very much, Avanique. Next up, we have Penny, followed by Mike.
Okay, this time I'm going to read Ron Hogan's. Alsu had a dream about a small country with very few people. They didn't need machines to get their work done faster. They took their life seriously and stayed close to home. They may have owned boats and carriages, but they never went anywhere. They may have owned weapons, but they kept these weapons locked up, securely hidden. They had so few responsibilities, they never had to make a to-do list to remember what had to be done. They enjoyed simple foods, dressed plainly, lived comfortably, and kept their traditions alive. And even though their neighbors were so close they could hear the dogs barking at night, they had no interest in leaving their homes, where they grew old peacefully and died.
Thank you very much, Penny. Next up, welcome, Shri Khan. Next up, we have Mike.
This is a translation from Charles Muller. Let there be a small country with few people who, even having much machinery, don't use it, who take death seriously and don't wander far away. Even though they have boats and carriages, they never ride in them. Having armor and weapons, they never go to war. Let them return to measurement by tying knots in rope. Sweeten their food, give them nice clothes, a peaceful abode, and a relaxed life. Even though the next country can be seen and its dogs and chickens can be heard, the people will grow old and die without visiting each other's land.
Thank you, Mike. Next up is Madeline. And folks, type exclamation point in the chat to read your favorite version of verse 80.
This is the Jafu Fun and Jane English. A small country has fewer people. Though there are machines that can work 10 to 100 times faster than people, they are not needed. The people take death seriously and do not travel far. Though they have boats and carriages, no one uses them. Though they have armor and weapons, no one displays them. People return to the knotting of rope in place of writing. Their food is plain and good. Their clothes fine but simple. Their homes secure. They are happy in their ways. Though they live within sight of their neighbors, and crowing cocks and barking dogs are heard across the way, yet they leave each other in peace while they grow old and die.
Thank you, Madeline. Next up, we have Brian. Brian Allen B, that is.
Okay. And it's poem 80, right? Okay. This is a new book that I've just got, slightly different. So I like the style. Let me read it then. Let the state be small and the people few. Let them have tools that do the work of 10 or 100 that are never used. The people respect death and do not move away. Let them have boats and carts and no need to ride in them. Let them possess armor and weapons and no need to flaunt them. Let them return to knotting cords, enjoy their food, adorn their clothes, be at peace at home, and enjoy everyday life. Let a neighboring state be close enough that people hear cocks crowing and dogs barking there, but they grow old and die without visiting the other. Okay.
Thank you so much, Brian. Would anybody else like to read their favorite version of verse 80? I'm going to actually read the Ursula Le Guin version, and then we can go to Jason's translation. Let there be a little country without many people. Let them have tools that do the work of 10 or 100 and never use them. Let them be mindful of death and disinclined to long journeys. They'd have ships and carriages, but no place to go. They'd have armor and weapons, but no parades. Instead of writing, they may go back to using knotted cords. They would enjoy eating, take pleasure in clothes, be happy with their houses, devoted to their customs. So with that, I will translate, turn it over to Jason.
Okay, let me read the translation first. In a small state with few people, let people have many tools, but they don't need to use them. Let people worry about death, so they don't migrate to distant places. There are boats and carriages, but the people don't ride on them. There are weapons and armors, but people don't display them. Let people revert to the ancient way of tying knots. Let them taste their food, admire their clothes, settle in their homes, entertain their customs. The neighboring states overlook one another. The crowing of roosters and the barking of dogs can be heard from one another. Throughout their lives, people have no comings and goings with one another. I think this one, the last stanza, the last 3 lines, the neighboring states overlook one another, and the crowing roosters and the barking of dogs can be heard from one another. Throughout their life, people have no comings and goings with one another. In Chinese, 邻国相望，鸡犬之声相闻，民至老死不相往来. This one is like a common utopia, okay, in the Taoism utopia, the ideal world. People in this world, they only have a small state, and the people don't do business to each other. And the distance are so close, even the neighboring states, the dog barking and the rooster crowing, you can be heard. And you even don't bother to do business with other states. So this one doesn't matter you like it or not, but basically that's the utopia idea of Taoism teaching. And I think in Penny's translation start with I'm dreaming this way. So that's also reflect the utopia idea. One thing I'd like to mention here is the tying knots. I think some translation use the tying knots as a measurement. I just have to say that could be incorrect historically, because according to Chinese legend, before people know how to write, the Chinese character has been invented. People tied in knot to as a writing to keep record of things. One way to think about it, that's also my kind of, I agree, but not in consensus, is the so-called hexagram, right? The Ba Gua, the book of change, yin and the yang, is start from tying knot. You can think about like a trigram. You have the 3 lines. You can see, for example, you tie 3 knots together, or knot, no knot, and the knot, or no knot, knot. It represents different things. So that could be the primary writing system, and then later on developed to Ba Gua, or the book of change, this kind of thing. And then later on become the Chinese writing. So when here is talking about, so this one is Taoism talking about, let people go back to tying knots, which is very primary, without knowledge, without study, the very, very primary stage. So that's a Taoism's idea. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And thank you for that explanation. Aman, would you like to comment?
Certainly. First of all, thank you, everyone. This has been great. This is one of my absolute favorite chapters, because in roughly 10 terse lines, Lao Tzu manages to one-up an entire book by Plato about what utopia actually looks like. And to do that so succinctly is quite remarkable. And both of those, the Republic or chapter 80 of the Dao De Jing, are both spelling out what is the ideal political structure, what is the ideal ethical structure, what is the good life for humans to live. I always found it fascinating that he starts off right from the bat by saying, ideal is a small village. I mean, we can go to anthropological reasons why there's a critical number of possible known relations a community can have, and yada, yada. But it made me think of a time when my brother worked for the zoo, which I wish I could find the picture of a baby walrus sleeping on him, because we tormented him with that for years. But I always ask him, I was like, aren't these enclosures really small? Aren't they kind of claustrophobic for these animals? I mean, wouldn't they be happier in a wide? And he said, think about yourself. You had, or you as a human, once upon a time had all the world open to you to choose from as your home, but you enclosed a small space to call your house, to call your home, because we're comfortable and happy in that limited amount of space with limited amount of interactions. And he said, those animals you see, you could make their enclosures bigger. They wouldn't be happier. They would be more anxious because they'd actually want less. That sticks with me when I re-examine Lao Tzu's utopia, this idea of small village, small, compartmentalized living, that any animal given its druthers will build itself a confined, enclosed space. That's what we feel safe in. Any animal feels safer in an amount of space that it can measure out, and it can observe and patrol without necessarily feeling like it's missing something. That's what I think the last line gets at. The idea that your neighbors are so close, you can hear their cocks crowing, you can hear their dogs barking, but you don't feel like you're missing something there. Because in Lao Tzu's utopia, that there is no better than your here. And so you feel no need to go there to get something you're missing here. It's really remarkable that such a profound idea could be compacted into such a tight terse little chapter. And I think, Jason, you did a masterful job doing it. The only thing I will say about the translation, there is one, I won't call it bone of contention, but this is one time where we get to disagree, because the disagreement is not just ours, it's everyone who's ever been a translator or a interpreter of the Dao De Jing. There are many times people think that certain words Chinese could mean anything. You can read a word to mean one thing or another. But in that second line where Jason's translation says tools, there are many translators who have interpreted that particular word, which I will throw into the chat if my computer decides to come to life. There we go. Which many interpreters have translated as weapons. And it makes the line read different if you think of people having many weapons but not using them versus many tools but not using them. It's two very different visions of what that utopia looks like. And this is not a case where, you know, there is in fact a given right answer. It is just a matter of people's opinions of interpretation, that this could be translated as weapon or this could be translated as tools. I think that vagaries like that, and they're rare, but I do think they're very intentionally there in the Dao De Jing, because the author wanted the person to be able to read it either of two ways and think of it in both ways. So that was my only comment there. It's good to see you all.
It's wonderful to see you, and fantastic takeaway. And I see Shri Khan is next, and I can't wait to hear what his takeaway, because it was celebrating the beauty of being provincial. And the least provincial person I've ever met is probably about to speak next. So I would be interested to hear how he feels about this utopia.
Thank you. I really like the way in which Aman started his commentary of distinguishing Lao Tzu's vision from that of Plato. And I think I'm going to read a short paragraph that Ursula Le Guin has about this, which goes to the heart of the matter, just like Aman did. Christian or Cartesian dualism, the division of spirit or mind from the material body and the world, existed long before Christianity or Descartes, and was never limited to Western thought, though it is the craziness or sickness that many people under Western domination see in the Western civilization. Lao Tzu thinks that the materialistic dualist who tries to ignore the body and live in the head, and the religious dualist who despises the body and lives for a reward in heaven, are both dangerous and in danger. So enjoy your life, he says. Live in your body. You are your body. Where else is there to go? Heaven and earth are one. As you walk the streets of your town, you walk on the way of heaven. So this integration of spirit and mind, which is there throughout Dao De Jing, of saying that don't, the deepest of ideas are living in you and around you. Don't miss that intimate connection between spirit and matter. I think that's what I see here. So I think that's very profound.
So it's Aristotelian, and
yes, I mean all of Taoism is Aristotelian. Dao is very Aristotelian in terms of kind of this going back and forth between the spirit and the matter. That there is the Dao and it produces 10,000 things, but there is this back and forth that is going on. You can't really understand the 10,000 things without the Dao, and those are kind of temporary things that keep changing. So you have to keep coming back, but you need to use names, and you do need to make those 10,000 things in order to live. That's how we function, but it's the Dao that is ruling all of it. So integration, this like continuous back and forth between center and periphery, this continuous flow between center and periphery, which is the nature of the center and the nature of the periphery. And both these dualists try to hold on to saying that, no, center and periphery are completely different.
Right.
So, and then they choose, okay, am I going to choose periphery or am I going to choose center? And when they do that, they actually lose both the center and the periphery. They have nothing.
That's right. I want to come back to that point. So next up, I see we have Jason.
Kind of the response to Aman's talk about the word qi as a tool, or let me share the screen one more time. The qi as a tool or as a weapon. When we exchange in email, I kind of disagree on the Aman's suggests as qi as a weapon. I think the reason is because if you look at it, because the first group of first paragraph, Lao Tzu talking about weapon at the end, and there's no need to repeat. But after Aman's explanation, I kind of rethink again. At this moment, I kind of think this word qi should be interpreted as a weapon instead of tools. The reason is this, it's interesting because the first paragraph is talking about political military thing. Second group or second paragraph is talking about the social life, okay? The food, the clothes, the living, and the custom. So it's organized in this way. So in this, if I base on this structure, the word qi here should be interpreted as weapon. So if you look at it, they have the word called shi, okay? In English, we will say let, okay? Let it to be this way. So basically, it talking about let it have the weapon, okay, but not use. And let have people worry about death, or so they don't travel, okay? They don't go away. So after that, they further explain, okay, people don't travel. Even they have the boat, they have the carriage, they don't travel. Even they have the weapon, they don't display it. So basically, the structure is fit very well if we interpret the qi as a weapon instead of tools. So I think that provides a good way to look at. Yeah, that's the way. Thank you, Aman.
Thank you, Jason. Aman.
Now I want to be my own devil's advocate. But I say that because I do think that both interpretations offer a really interesting vision of this utopia. If you read this as let the people have many tools, but no need to use them, then you're talking about a world in which what do you use tools for? Tools are a means to an end, to achieving something. If you have many, but you don't need to use them, then the ends you need to achieve are not required. You have enough that you need not use your tools. It's kind of like the world's perfect handyman who has fixed everything in a home so he's never having to go to his tool belt or his toolbox. He has the tools, but he's so on the job, he doesn't ever really have to use them. That's a utopia of, I don't want to say idleness because that is probably pejorative in the English language, but it's of leisure. It's a utopia of leisure. If you think of this translation as saying, let the people have many weapons, but they don't need to use them, then you're envisioning an armed populace capable of defending and caring for itself and protecting itself. But the utopia is that self-sufficiency is there, but never has to be called up, never has to be put into action. And so one is a utopia that has more leisure in mind, One is a utopia that has security in mind. And I think sort of toying between those two ideas is very intentionally why this uses that word chi, to get the reader to read it once, understand it one way, and then read it again and read it the other way. But I do agree with Jason. The theme of the first stanza or the first section is militaristic, which is one of the reasons why I personally favor the reading of that word as weapon as opposed to tool. But I really do think that it's valuable knowing that it can be read both ways.
I completely agree with that. And I think that it was interesting when I was writing my notes, when I was thinking about this particular passage, the first thing that had come to mind was sustainability, where there wasn't any need for want, or and this is reading different translations. But then I read the Ursula Le Guin translation, who happens to use weapons. And then I put there was actually no need for war as a little notation. So it's kind of changing the whole dynamic of what it was. It was a sustainable culture where everybody had enough, and there was just this, no need to go out in the world, and everybody was content, and there was no need to go for greener pastures. But then, if you change that word, it's also a different type of there's no need for war, and you kind of arrive at the same place to a certain degree, but it's just a different way of looking at it, I think. But thank you for that, Amon. So we have Evanique followed by Madeline.
Yeah, one of the things when we were reading this, I was thinking, I had went back to chapter 1 and read it today, just kind of going back over it. And it was the part where it said, in being without desires, you experience wonder, but by having desires, you experience the journey. And I was thinking that either is good. Having no desires may be good, and having desires can be good, and it's contentment. And I was thinking of chapter 80 in the same way. It's like you have the things you need, and you don't need to explore. But if you want to, you can. Like, a lot of people say they feel the need to get out of where they're at. And that, I think that creates discontentment, which doesn't make you happy. But if you have a desire and you want something, I think a want is different than a need. So if you want to explore, that's great. And then there's people who don't really feel the need to explore. And I think for a lot of people that sounds strange, but if it works for them, that it works. So I think it's just being content either way, whether you're exploring or whether you're not. I think the thing about the tools or versus weapons, I don't have any opinion about that. But I was thinking of it in terms of the tools, and it's like having something that you need when you need it. So it's kind of like if you're in a car, you don't ever use like your toolkit. Like if you get a flat tire, it's great to have a car jack and the tool to get the tire off and put the spare on, right? You may never use it, but it's always there. And it kind of makes you feel content knowing that it's there, rather than, getting into an accident and not having what you need. So I think the emphasis on having what you need, I think people misinterpret that. Like, it's like if like you have the bare minimum. And I don't think that's good either, because like it says, you may have things that you don't need to use every day, but if when you need it, you need it. So I think it's not, I don't think it's saying anything against materialism or anything like that, but I think it also is pointing out that, you don't have to desire the world. Like Aman was saying with the animals, that, they have that dwelling, and if you give them more room, they would not be happy. I look at people with big houses, and yet they only stay in a certain amount of rooms. Like it makes sense that, I have enough to have what I need, but when I have more, it's like it sounds good, but is it really good, or does it just create more problems when you have excess? and it has excess, like what type of problems does it create for you? So I think there's a warning against that too. But I really love this, and I really love the parallels really with chapter 1. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Ebony. Yeah, I would just really quickly want to build on this point, this idea that you need to go out and explore. There was in verse 47. I don't know if anybody recalls that particular one. Without the Jia Fufang version is, without going outside, you may know the whole world. Without looking through the window, you may see the ways of heaven. The farther that you go, the less you know. Thus the sage knows without traveling. He sees without looking. He works without doing. And it's kind of this similar type of feeling that I have to some of your comments is you don't have the need to go out and explore the world to become knowledgeable. So it's something that it's also consistent with past passages as well. So with that, I have next up, I believe I have Madeline, followed by JP.
If Margareta wants to read the Bahasa, I'd rather wait for her.
I'd always wait for that. Margarita, forgive me for not asking. If you've had a moment to gather yourself. I don't want to put you on the spot either. We can come back to you.
I think I put her on the spot. I was asking.
Yeah, I mean, it's the last two, so it would be preferable to hear it.
Okay, I'll
yeah,
I'll charge in here.
Okay, we'll come back.
Let's see. Well, this one it reminds me of one of those very sweet country western songs. You know, like me and my friends were sitting on the hood of the pickup truck on the old red dirt road on the acreage, watching the full moon rise, and tomorrow we're all getting up and going to work again. So I don't know when this golden age is in verse 80, whether it's in the past or in the present or in a dream, but it is quite lovely. The only way it would work, of course, is if there is a steady population. In other words, as soon as there's population growth, there won't be enough land to support everyone, and people will have to leave. You know, it's not a, I can't think of the guy's name. Anyway, that sort of offbeat economist who believes that you can have infinite population growth and still support everyone agriculturally. So what I'm
That's
wondering.
everybody that's not Malthusian.
Okay, well, Malthus was right. And everybody else was wrong. As we shall see, but maybe not in our lifetimes. So I'm wondering about this line, which is suddenly not quite as utopian, which is the people take death seriously and do not travel far. Is that because they say to themselves, life is short and I love it here where I am. I love this land where my ancestors lived, and I love my relatives and my neighbors? Or is it more like travel is dangerous, you don't know what's out there, so you're better off staying close to home?
Go ahead, Jason. I see you.
Yeah, I think the Madeline is a pretty good question on the population growth on this one. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think just very idealistic idea, right? So when the population grows, no war, okay, people don't go to war and live peacefully. And of course, you expect the population growth, then there's no solution. That's 100% correct. So I'm not argue. I'm not going to defend the Taoism, this utopia idea. But I'd like to mention a little bit, talk about like this Saturdays, we talk the Asian philosophy talking about the legalism, Han Fei, okay, exactly point to this idea, right? Han Fei is more realistic, okay? He is talking about like the ancient people, okay, or the ancient state is not good, not really a utopia. He's talking about the ancient people are not have a higher virtue or higher moral standard just because they have less population. And so relatively, they have more resources. That's why the ancient people can live peacefully. And you look at the ancient people, you see they have higher moral standard. They act morally because they have more resources. So that argument is very hard to defend, right? So I think at the same time, almost the same time, they have another school is argue against this kind of idea.
This is interesting. I don't want to break it into an economics discussion with the idea of population, but it is but the first line that I have in the Ursula Le Guin version as well is let there be a little country without many people does speak to this idea of having enough resources to fulfill everybody's needs. There are some labor issues though as well, so we won't go into that, especially if we get into pensions. But I don't think they were really working with that. So next up, Margarita, would you like to read? We have Actually, let's let JP go first, and then Kevin or JP and Kevin. Would you mind letting Margarita read? Would it be okay?
Yes, I'm waiting for her. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Bahasa.
Okay. Memerintah negeri kecil sesuai dengan Dao. Mengurus negeri kecil yang sedikit rakyatnya dengan alat-alat sangat banyak hingga berlebihan dan tak terpakai. Membuat rakyat hidup beruntung, tak memandang ringan pada kematian, dan tak suka melakukan perjalanan jauh. Walaupun memiliki perahu dan kereta, namun tak ada yang mau menggunakannya. Walaupun memiliki senjata dan alat-alat perang, tak ada yang mau menggunakannya. Diusahakan supaya rakyat kembali pada sifat yang sewajarnya, menggunakan tali ikatan untuk mencatat suatu perkataan. Enak makannya, indah pakaiannya, tenang tempat tinggalnya, dan suka dengan kepribadiannya. Negeri tetangga berhadapan satu sama lain, kokok ayam dan gonggong anjing terdengar, namun rakyat hingga tua dan mati tak mengadakan hubungan. Actually, I also have a comment, but maybe after
JP and Kevin.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that. It wouldn't be the same if you had not read it. So also welcome to David. We were wondering where you were. So JP, you're next.
Good evening. And for those who didn't hear Margarita sing a poem last week on Monday, it was terrific.
Yes.
I've
You can go
noticed
back and
several
watch that
times,
video.
I've noticed several times how references are made to a previous verse and how the verses connect. I'm going to get to 79 in just a moment, but all the way through 1 through 81, I read it almost as a story. Where in the beginning is their whole idea of a beginning of words and names that's going to culminate in 81. But through it all, ideas keep repeating. And I think here in 80 is what's trying to happen with what has been done by Latzer is to repeat a lot of the same ideas, as whether it's tools or weapons, they've been mentioned before, the size of a country. Clothing has been mentioned at least twice, about the ruler's clothing, about the sage's clothing, about peace. Now, I don't think there's anything about roosters and dogs. It's an interesting addition there. But a lot of the information to me has already been settled all the way through. And when I look at 79 about the question as to the contract, and now are we going to follow through and have peace? This is the answer, having gone through everything else, balancing the polarities, finding the way of handling a country, of not having a war and finding peace. Everything here is now stating in 80, this would be the way things should end up, if that makes sense. Thank you. Oh, straw dogs. Yes, the straw dogs. Thank you, Aman.
It makes perfect sense. Thank you for your thoughts, JP. Next up, we have Kevin, followed by Margarita.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, initially I don't know what to see. Every chapter or every thought from Dao De Jing is slightly opposite, or it's just a different our modern days, a digital age practice. We value tools so much, right? So we love tools, save time. We can travel, in hours in the world, right? Then, so for me, another point, it's about the cognitive thinking, how to value things. One way we can value like what we practice. Another way is Dao. For example, this one, you can see it's utopian, but also in our heart, we pursue those things. We have food, we have clothing, relax. One observation, if you see the people live the rural area or farmers, you see their facial, their face so calm, so close to nature. And if you city, whoever work on a city, for example, Toronto, New York, Beijing, those crowd city, people so busy, so walk so fast, everything you see there, where's that life? So yeah, and another point, when we people get older, they miss their childhood. I'm not sure you guys experience that. Also, whoever migrate to a new place, they miss their home, old place also. That's our life is limited. How about a human being, generation by generation? I would guess we lost something, which valuable in our heart or in our, yeah. By the way, language is tools. Tools could be a weapon. We know the verbal insults, all right. We can value language. Value this is good, that's bad. We see that's a lot happen. You value me bad, I'm going to value you on our side bad. So who is right? Thank you.
I like that, Kevin, the idea of having a value system and not necessarily taking any more than you need. And that is this kind of goes into this whole idea of how you have a utopian society, is that also your ethics are in line in order to make this work. If somebody were to hoard things in this type of society, then it wouldn't necessarily work. Thank you for those comments. Let me see, next up, we have Margarita. Jason, you already spoke. I'm assuming you had answered. Okay. Margarita, followed by Penny. I'm assuming it's Penny.
Actually, when I read this, I kind of see the neurodiversity of utopia. So I work with children with autism. So with them, this world is so chaotic, it's unknown, it's too wide. So they want to retract that and making that into smaller world that they can understand, they can contain by developing routines. So schedule is very important for them. If they want to learn new things, they need to have that sense of control. So little environment, structure, schedule, and routine is actually what they can see as a good world, a better world. So maybe we know that the good place, the good living, the utopia may be different from one to another, but that's also show that how different we are in seeing what is good life, and even up to now. Actually, I really like let them tying the knots of words, something like that. That's really show how we can attach ourselves into routine to create a better life, and that show people with autism how they live their life like that in order to get good living. So yeah, I can appreciate how this kind of thing can be an utopia for somebody or some people with their different way of thinking. Yeah, thank you.
I completely agree with that. I think that one of the things that living in a society, a utopian society like such as this, where it's, you know, small and everybody has and what they need, is that it eliminates uncertainty. You know, and that's a really important point that creates a lot of anxiety in our daily lives today. So in this, you know, when you're, if you're, you know, if you're somebody that wants to basically focus or limit your world, then you know, you look for simple things to make that you know, to make your world as routine as possible, so that, you know, essentially you can relax, you have less anxiety of the unknown, you're no longer challenging the unknown. There's both good and bad with that, but anyway, I love the comments. I think next up we have I believe it's Penny,
Yes.
then Laura.
Kind of on the basis of what a lot of people have said, you know, I think that this is a utopia where life is very simple. And you know, you think maybe about like what you hear about some of the tribal people that are still living in Brazil, and they have a very, very simple life. And you know, they basically live the same as their ancestors did. And so they don't need a lot of tools. They don't need to have a lot more things. Everybody just needs the minimal amount of things. And then because they don't spend a lot of time making things or trying to produce things, then they have a lot more time for relationships, for just enjoying, you know, the community, the family, and just, you know, the simple things that they have. You know, they need to have clothing, they need to have a place to live. But I think the idea of growth is very, to me, kind of very modern and capitalistic and everything like that. Like the idea that we always have to have growth. We always have to have more. And I often think, why do we always have to have more? I mean, you know, do we really need more? But I think that's the idea here. I mean, you know, if everybody has sufficient, then they can focus on other things, you know, more like just enjoying themselves and being with family than in trying to produce more.
Sorry, I was muted. I can appreciate that comment even more now, because I've actually been recently reading about economist Kate Raworth. For any of you that don't know who she has something called donut economics, but it's more about questions the idea of growth being the goal, and whether that's an ideal to shoot for. And it just depends on what your perspective is on the world. You know, many people will make the argument that innovation is needed in order to push a country forward, that you need to, instead of maintenance. But there's also this idea of sustainable growth, and actually how do you measure progress? And then you don't necessarily need to grow, you need to maintain. And she literally has a donut of factors that go in, and it's not just specifically focused on gross domestic product or GDP as the goal. It's focused on a more holistic way of looking at progress, progress a society makes. I'll put something in the chat about that. But with that, you know, this type of utopia, people are content, for which, yes, then you wouldn't be focused on growing, you'd be focused on maintaining and sustaining, which is just a different world perspective. And there are countries that are happier because of that, or at least if you go by certain indexes anyway. So it's just a different way of looking at the world. Thank you, Penny. I don't see anybody else. Oh, Laura, forgive me. I'm sorry you had your hand up. Kind of blind.
Yeah, I did. And my feeling is that even in today's society, may it not be utopia, but if you look at even the busiest of families, they have schedules, they have calendars, they schedule in family time, they schedule in every moment of time, in that sense. And it's not necessarily to bring a utopia, I don't know, but it's to make their lives as perfect as it can be, having all the elements in it. And then there's not really necessarily growth, but getting all the kinds of things that you feel your life that you need in your life, that your children need in their lives. And it may be all those extracurricular activities that the kids have to go to that have to be accounted for, what parents need to have date nights and things. So what I'm sort of saying about that, it seems instinctual in us as people, that we have that we're always sort of searching for sort of an optimal existence, no matter whether it's a utopian one or just within our family unit that we, within the society, but we look for that. And I'm not sure if I'm stating that as well as I want to.
No, it's just fine. I mean, go ahead, Aman. Thank
Oh,
you.
no, please let Kevin go first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin put his. Okay.
Yeah, I'm could go first. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I want to share one. There's so many things if I want to say from Franklin. The one thing is about the knowledge. They say that, they turn to the tie knots knitting or that days. So now these days, how do we pursue knowledge? I'll give you one of my personal experience when my childhood in the student time, 6 o'clock to 7 is the morning reading. Then 8 to 12, that's another 4 classes. Then lunchtime 12 to 2, then 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock, another 3 classes. Then back to dinner, then 7 to 9, also back to the evening study. So all about the books, textbooks. So then sometimes during the end of high school, you go to university. So go to high competition. In China, we call it Gaokao, for example. The school close by, so we still turn, even though life turn off, we still use our oil lamp or candle. Continue learning until 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock. Next morning, 5 to 6 o'clock. Almost 6 days, sometimes 7 days. This happen, I know, it's in for example, in North America are normally advanced country about 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock. We are done. Last homework. But other places, it's a different story. That's one sharing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Yeah, modern life can actually be very demanding indeed. Kevin, or I'm on. I'm sorry.
I know I look exactly like Kevin.
Well, ever since you both put on your cameras today. That's why.
Actually, Laura and Kevin's comments got me thinking about that compare and contrast between this and the Republic. The pursuit in the Republic is a long, investigation to try and figure out what is the good. That is the argument that Plato is going after. And we in the West have conflated that notion of the good with the pursuit of happiness, happiness being the metric that we use as something being good. I think the chapter before this, chapter 79, the opening word, harmony, gives a better indication of what the good, if we can say that's what Lao Tzu's utopia is after, is seeking. It's seeking harmony within the society, within the person, within the family, within the entire structure. And harmony does not necessarily mean happiness at every turn. I'm reminded of something I was told when I was told I was going to be a father. Somebody had said, "Oh, good. Congratulations, you now get to live a life of joy devoid of happiness," which always just mystified me until, here I am 20 some years later and understand what the difference was between joy and happiness. Children are a joy. They don't bring a lot of happiness per se. In fact, they bring a lot of schedules, a lot of hecticness, a lot of stress. But when you can harmonize that stress, that hecticness, that difficulty with the joy that comes from that, there's a good that is brought into your life. I do think that what Lao Tzu is expressing here is a state in which people could be harmonious, not always necessarily happy. I wouldn't even necessarily say eudaimonia, because I don't think it's fulfilling at every given level of an individual's life. I'm sure there's a carpenter in his utopia who just wishes he could be a gong player, but he can be a really good carpenter and bring a lot of value to those around him and take pride and joy out of what he's done to bring harmony to his culture, to his people, to his environment, to his society. And if there is a good that this is after, I would say it's after that ideal of harmony more than it is any sort of personal, elation. So yeah, when Kevin and Laura were talking about these ideas of life being a hectic schedule, that can be the case. But if you have that in measure with your time to repose, time to reflect, time to enjoy, then you get a harmony that I think really speaks to this chapter.
I really like that a lot, and you're not going to believe me, but I literally was in a discussion 2 weeks ago about how married people with kids have more joy, but people without kids have more like happiness. So like, and it was literally like that it was a study that was based on that, and really what it came down to was something along the lines of, it was the pursuit of meaning, which was really, it was kind of coming, the author was getting going at, but it was an interesting distinction because joy requires some effort, and like this idea that you're constantly going to be in a state of happiness is actually not sustainable in and of itself. It's just, has to be some time that you have to put effort forth doing things that you don't want to do in order to actually understand what it is to be happy, and to be happy. And then over a longer period of time, you have the joy of the output of your work. People find meaning in different ways, but it was interesting. It was a study that somebody was just telling me about. We were discussing it actually not too long ago, and they made that very distinction. So with that, we'll go to Kevin and then Evanique.
Thank you. First, I want to agree with I'm about the harmony. That's the whole chapter. Even they didn't see that in the no word for that. I want to point one word about this. They basic translate a little bit of culture aspect even. Jason translate people worry about that, so they don't migrate to distant. Like traditionally, people like stay at hometown. They don't want to migrate. Why people migrate? Because war, or they need a local opportunity. They want to survive. That's you can say kind of consider refugee, I would say from that angle. That's first. 使民重死而不远兮 consider that that's very important thing, not going to move far away. On the last one, 民老死而不相往来. This mean people until they die, they don't even bother each other. After this important, right? They have a good life. You don't compete with me. I don't compete with you. You can achieve your goal. I can achieve mine. You enjoy a center. I enjoy a periphery. If I would say use that way, so that would be nice too, right? So you like hear the some of the high end music. I like the birds singing. So. And also, I would say one thing, the traditional thing, we call it 生不带来，死不带去. One thing, what's that mean translated in English is, life doesn't bring anything when we were born. And when we die, didn't bring anything out with you when you pass it away, right? So when we live, we pursue wealthy, fame, and even house. So if imagine we can live with nature, live on neighbors, live with relationship, that's make you obviously that's another way you think about your how valuable for your life. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. So, Ebony, do you have a comment as well? And I do want to come back to the idea of contentment and to Kevin's comments in a minute.
So yeah, so when Aman was talking about harmony, and I was like, well, what exactly is harmony? Is it like kumbaya? So I did just a quick Google search, and it's many different things, but this idea of social harmony is defined as the process of valuing, expressing, and promoting love, trust, admiration, peace, harmony, respect, generosity, and equity among the people in any particular society. And when I was thinking of that, I was thinking happiness is not in that definition as we were talking. And I was thinking, like, why? Because sometimes peace means that you are temporarily unhappy. When you're trying to create social harmony and you're not trying to get your way necessarily, it may be because your peace means more to you than your happiness sometimes. Even if it means letting the other person get the last word in an argument or not participating in an argument, because what would be the point? And it's just, to me, it's about thinking, how do you protect your peace? How do you protect your joy? Not necessarily your happiness, not necessarily like it would make you happy to get in the last dig with somebody in particular that you don't like, but how would that leave you? And I think of that also in terms of center and periphery. Like, what action are you doing? Is it going to bring you towards your center, or is it going to bring you towards the periphery? And where do you want to go? Do you, like, if you have this argument or you do this thing or you take this action, will it bring you closer to who you are, or would you be further away after doing it? And then that is, I think, harmony. It may not feel good to do it at that time, but at the end, you sacrifice that to maintain your peace and your harmony. So those were my thoughts of that. I just thought that was like a great part of the discussion.
Thank you for adding to that great part of the discussion. Madeline.
Okay, Joe.
So if you have about a half hour, then actually I'm going to have Margaretha sing Jason's version of the poem. No, I'm just joking. In order to keep it going.
I'm just wondering if Lao Tzu was, I don't think he could possibly have been 100% serious about this. or, you know, whoever had the translation that starts out sort of, I had this in a dream. You know, it's not that he's being sarcastic or quite tongue-in-cheek, but by the time he'd written this, the Chinese were very far more than technologically advanced than what this is talking about. It wasn't just the writing. They had plows, they had stirrups, they had sophisticated weaponry of all kinds. They were incredibly far ahead of what passed for Western civilization at that point. So, you know, it's almost like someone now saying, okay, let's all go live like Mennonites because we would be happier. Okay, we might be happier, but it's probably not going to happen. And I'm just wondering, was he holding this out? I don't think he was holding this out as a goal, as like a personal goal. I think maybe in some sense, I'm just going to veer off into Jungianism for a moment. If we looked at this as a dream in which all of the elements are aspects of yourself, so the way that, like, say, in a dream that takes place in a house that represents your psyche, and then blah, blah, whatever's going on, and you sort of look at all the different elements to see, put yourself in their place and let different parts of yourself speak. It could be that he's also referring to the human psyche here. Like what an integrated Taoist self would be like in terms of envy, say like dogs barking and the cocks crowing, in terms of not feeling like you need to display your weaponry or your tools because you're a master of them, in terms of enjoying your food. So it might also be more of a something on a personal level that addresses the sort of different many parts of oneself.
One of my favorite quotes that I was putting into the chat was by a Mon. You know, the idea of keeping up with the Joneses doesn't exist in this culture. And yes, I mean, I think that really that you captured it well. It's and this was written at a time though where everybody was going to war over with one another as well. So we need to keep that in mind. And so this ideal state is where, you know, yes, you're not necessarily worried about what the next person has. You're just worried about having enough. And that's where this idea of contentment comes in, being content. And it's fascinating to see that this still applies today in some way, shape, or form in a society that we're so based off of consumerism that that we actually, you know, we aren't content, and even though we have more stuff than they would have had back then. So I didn't want to go too far down the modern road, but Jason, you actually typed exclamation point.
Yeah, just kind of respond to Madeline's discussion about like this one is a dream, right? And when we talk about utopian, talk about dream, and in today's world, we will think about Martin Luther King, I have a dream. But if you say both are dream, that's a different here. That's my criticize on the traditional Chinese philosophy. When Martin Luther King talk about dream, he talk about future dream. And the Chinese talk about dream or utopian talk about the past. So the situation is Chinese philosophy is so-called a regressive historical view, or you want to call it a progressive degeneration. The later the worse, the older the better. Let's stick in everybody's mind in Taoism, in Confucianism, they all talk about this way, except legalism, which has been strongly refuted in Chinese tradition. Okay, so everybody talk about the older is better. So in this one, Lao Tzu is talking about the old time. Okay, it's a good time. Okay, so he blend on the technology instead of blend on the growth of population, right? Actually, if in today's view, we will blend on the growth of population because we have so many people with lack of resources. That's why today has a problem. But Lao's criticize is, oh, because we have a new technology. That's why we have the problem. So that's the idea, he's talking about. I try to take an objective view to describe what Lao's mind in this writing. That's, I think, his thing. That's the first thing I'd like to talk about. And another thing about the harmony, I think Evan Nick talked about harmony. It's a very different concept, okay, in East and West, okay. West probably don't value harmony that much. Even West talking about harmony, okay. I think in Greek philosophy, harmony is kind of related to soul and to proportion, right measurement. Right? When we talk about harmony, doesn't mean we all equal. That means the king take this part, or we talk about use orchestra as an idea, right? The first violinist, okay, play 1/3 of time, and the trombone play only 5% of the time. Okay, then we call harmony. Everybody get its portion. Chinese or Asian harmony is different in two ways. First, harmony probably the highest goal, the ultimate goal of the social justice. That's the harmony, which means no disturbance, stable. You get your own peace. That's the kind of idea. To explain how important of harmony, we can look at Japan, which almost take the culture from Neo-Confucianism. Japan called their own people, the race, as harmony, great harmony people. Today's emperor, each emperor has their own calendar name. They name it Reiwa, right? That means harmony, make it harmony. Okay, so in this way, we can see how important harmony in Asian culture. So that's what I'd like to say. Yeah, thank you.
Wow, great comments. Thank you, Jason. Scott, welcome. I'm looking forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you. I'm coming in at the tail end, so I almost hesitate to say this, but so when I was introduced to the Dao De Jing, I wanted to talk about basic first principles. So as far as I was taught, this is not one man's idea of utopia or social rules, or he's writing down how the universe works. And so if you're rich or if you're poor, these are how things happen. And so it's like Buddha wrote about enlightenment in a time there were no cell phones. But if a enlightened person happened today, their writing would be more in our context. And I think it's important when we talk about capitalism. I mean, certainly the idea of gaining, the latest toy is just the mind looking for, mind doing its trip. But the mind equally doing its trip, if you're born in San Francisco and not Beverly Hills, your idea of the mind gaining something will be what can I destroy today? Or what can I tear down today? I mean, that was blunter than I should have put it, but so I think, anyway, I just want to say, as far as I understood, this was the way the universe works. Is that not everyone else's understanding of what this is?
Of what this is the way the universe works. I think it's an idealistic way the universe works. I don't necessarily think it's that this is coming up with the ideal.
What's not practical? In other words, how does the universe work differently? I don't mean some financial industry or some rules in any given country, but what principles did you talk about that you see as not being realistic or practical, or world works differently?
They're all practical. I think is it practical for an entire society to do it?
Okay.
That's a different question. So as an individual, I would see this as something as a practical practice, where but Aman and Jason are going to have their comments as well. So I'm looking forward to that. Whoever wants to go first.
I just really wanted to briefly respond to Scott's question and or comment, which is to say that I agree. The Dao De Jing tends to be as much descriptive as it is prescriptive. It very commonly even couches what it has as prescription in terms of description. Even this chapter, in a small country, let there be. It's talking about it in terms where it says, this is how it was, or this is how it could be, or this is how it is when you have these things. As far as whether that translates to, it's not high-handedly prescriptive. It's saying, here's what we know as these things work. Do these things or don't do these things, but know that if you follow these ways, you work closer towards harmony, towards being in harmony with the Tao. Working against the current, you will probably be buying yourself strife. As far as the goal here goes, one thing, and this is in response kind of to Madeline's question, I think that there is a reinterpretation of the idea of goal here. This is not necessarily as goal to be achieved, but goal to be worked towards. And I think I mentioned this once before. One of the earliest lessons, and now that I have my camera on, I can show this. My Sifu actually ever taught me was make your elbow not bent, not straight, which when you start trying to do that, you never, ever can achieve an elbow that is not bent, not straight. But by having that as the goal, you work closer and closer and closer to it. So having unachievable goals is a metric that can be set down as an incentive to work towards greater efforts towards that ends without ever necessarily seeking to achieve it. In the same way, if this is prescriptive, it would have been in a time where it would have been impossible, much like we are not all going to live like Mennonites now, myself included, because I couldn't have this Zoom meeting with you on Quaker technology. This is a very fine tool, and I have no inclination to renounce it. But knowing that that goal is out there and using it as a metric of, okay, can I do more towards this ends? Have I done enough towards this ends? Is there more I can do? Is really a valuable prescriptive tool.
Thank you, Aman. So I have Margaretha actually is next. And then would you, Jason, do you want to respond first to maybe Scott, or does?
Yeah, I have something related to Scott. So sorry, Margarita. I just want before people forget about Scott. So I'd like to respond to what Scott talking about the what's the Dao De Jing supposed to be about universe or about this one. Okay, I think that I have been pondering this kind of question for a long, long time because I study Western and the Chinese philosophy. a lot of people will categorize, or which is correct, Dao De Jing as metaphysics, okay, writing, okay. So I think the metaphysics is a very confusing term, okay, in today's, especially in philosophy field, right? When we in the Western philosophy, when we talk about metaphysics, first thing we think about the three subject, right? The God, immortality, and the free will. Okay, God you can relate it as a universe. But when you move this metaphysics to Chinese metaphysics, it will be different. Okay, because there's no God, there's no immortality, there's no free will being discussed. And why we still talk about metaphysics? Okay, because if you go back to, good example is Kant, the groundwork of metaphysics of morals. Why he called metaphysics of moral? He's talking about, I think he's talking about the moral foundation or moral reasoning. Okay, and in Western world, the moral reasoning, moral foundation is metaphysics, which is God, which is immortality, which is free will. That's our moral foundation or moral reasoning. Okay, so if you move this one to Asia or Dao De Jing, the moral reasoning is this, okay, but not God, not immortality, not about free will. It's about the universe. And how does the universe related to moral? Let's go back another level, because the Western universe is different than Asian or Chinese universe. And I think Indian universe also different than in a different way. So Western universe is people is outside the universe. You look at universe as an object. So you start to study it. Okay, here's the sun, here's the earth, here's the Mars. But in Asia, universe is homogeneous. So people are part of the universe. So the whole universe, the rule applied to universe also apply to people. So we are part of the universe. That's why when Dao De Jing, Scott talk about, oh, Dao De Jing supposed to talk about universe. Yes, it talk about universe, but which the same rule, which is Dao, operate the universe, also operate the people. Okay. So I think that's the whole idea, and that caused a lot of confusion here. But I think that's my explanation on this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next up in chivalry is not dead, but next up is Margarita.
Thank you so much. But actually what I want to say is already explained very well by Jason and Kevin, and also, but maybe just a little bit of practical example. So the Gallup polls, they use happiness scale. Actually, we all can feel it. How do you feel, for example, in terms of behavior learning? How happy are you when you're learning? That is hedonic, and that is Western tradition. We in Indonesia, for example, we can feel it, but maybe that is not the best way to understand how well our life is. As Jason has mentioned, it's more harmonious, perhaps. And also, even in the Western tradition, there is hedonic perspective and eudaimonia, like the Aristotelian and also Plato, how work you will put into creating a good life. So for example, how many hours you will work for making sure that your learning is good. So that will be different question in terms of identifying whether you're okay with your life. But in Asian tradition, for example, I'm maybe talking in Javanese, yeah, maybe Chinese, Jason and Kevin knows better. That kind of question will not explain about how well we're doing with our learning. That's already happening with the OEDC, if I'm not mistaken. Student in Indonesia, they say that they're pretty good, 7, between 1 to 10, they say they're all 7, but their grades are not so well. Why? Because this is not exactly the question you want to know about how well they're learning. Perhaps different question like whether your learning now has made you feel that you are part of your class, or has made you feel you're a better learner in your class. That will be different question, and it will be answered differently. So yeah, our discussion probably represent how the discussion now in for millennials probably in understanding what constitutes a good life. And I don't think it will be solved. This is a utopia, just like what Amon said, and we are doing our best to get closer to it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. So next up we have Shri Khan, and I want to apologize to Shri Khan because I know that I let a couple people go in front of you, and I would never of all people that I would let the kind of run out. So
no, I'm really really intrigued by Jason's point about harmony and Amon's description of keeping your making sure that the elbow is straight and not straight. Because the larger point is that which Jason was making explicitly in two different ways is that these cultures are different. The Western thought, Chinese thought, and the Indian thought are different. And they're different in how they are structured fundamentally and what is important, what concepts come first. So for example, concept of harmony is so fundamental to the Chinese thought. Similarly, the concepts in India, which are fundamental, are different. Concepts which are fundamental in West are different. And appreciation of that, I think, is the greatest thing that you can get by studying the other culture. Like, what is, how is the way of approaching thinking, approaching the world different? And there, I think harmony, if I had to kind of capture, if I had to identify like one word for me, like I don't understand the Chinese culture too well, but I think harmony is probably the best candidate I have, or health or something like that. Like, for example, consider the elbow, right? Where you're focused on saying, what is a harmonious situation? One which gives enough flexibility and strength at the same time. And how do you achieve? It's a highly dynamic situation. It calls for this continuous loop running in your consciousness to fine tune with yourself, with the world. And this applies not only to nature, I mean, it comes from nature, but it applies to an individual and it applies to the society. And it's the same idea in different forms going through. So I see that as being, I mean, the best I understand it, but I want to open that and see if, Jason, Amon, or anybody else has comments about it. What is the fundamental concept, and how is it fundamental concept of Chinese thinking, and how is it different from Western thinking?
Great question. Amon.
Well, to that end, Shri Khan, you talking about how this sort of fine-tuning sensitivity, the ability to dynamically adjust, makes me think of Asian hospitality, where the onus is so very internalized on the part of the host to make the guest comfortable that you are scrutinized almost like by a medical team to absolutely guarantee that your comfort and their obligation to be hospitable is being met. Are you warm enough? Are you thirsty? Are you comfortable? All of these little details are constantly readjusted and reoriented. And in just a simple social interaction, the irony of that is that the comfort being so paramount on the part of the host, it can actually make you as a guest quite uncomfortable about putting any additional stressors on them. And so it becomes a feedback loop of gauging one another so much that it's very difficult to actually relax. And this is kind of that yin-yang dynamic that I think Lao Tzu gets at very well and has a wonderful critique of, saying, doing it this way, trying to make this so, omniimportant in your existence that you lose the forest for the trees. You lose the fact that the point is to enjoy each other's company. So stop asking if I want another cup of tea or blanket and just sit and chat with me like friends. The Taoists were really good about satirizing, about recognizing, and about lambasting that aspect of Chinese culture. I have to acknowledge, though, that the Confucian value, which prescribes that, has certainly won out over the Taoist inclination to say, stop it, you're actually getting inverse results from your expectations. But that acknowledgement that inverse results of expectations can often be generated through too much force still does exist somewhere in most Asian psyche, so that most people, after the third or fourth hour of sharing shots and karaoke, will finally settle down enough to say, okay, I think we've met the obligations, now we can have fun. Granted, most people are blitheringly drunk by that point in the evening, but that also is very Taoistic.
Jason, would you like to?
I think I already spoke on the harmony. I think I try not to say it's good or bad. Okay, it has its own problem, it's its own advantage. But the harmony really is the one thing I like to mention is, if you look at the political system in the Western, okay, let's say forget about China. Okay, let's talk about the Asian democratic country like Korean, Japan, Taiwan. So both Western and Asian talk about democratic government, but Western is based on the check and the balance. Okay, so it's a dynamic balance. And then in Asia, even the system is check and the balance, but people try to achieve its harmony. Okay, so it's more static. Okay, people ridicule American, even it's a democratic system, because it's fighting each other. They are selfish. They just look at their own interest. They fight each other all the time. Unlike, we try to achieve the harmony because we work together. Unlike, they work against each other. So that's the view on that. I try not to say which, I'm not saying which one is good, which one is bad, but that's the totally different concept. So I think in the political system, you can say, you can see this one. And then again, you can see from the highest level, you see the political system. But on the lowest level, you see the daily conversation, right? In the Western, people more tend to bring the different idea to argue, to discuss. We call discuss, to find the truth. Okay, and in the Asia, people try not to bring the different opinion. People try to agree to bring harmony, which I'm not saying American ignore harmony. I'm not saying Asian ignore the debate or dialectical approach, but Asian more always put the harmony as the highest goal, ultimate goal. And in American or Western world tend to put dialectical express myself as the highest goal. So I think that's the two different ways, of living. Since I'm moving back and forth, even I claim myself is a perfect fit on both society, I still have some mental adjustment I have to deal, whenever I move to different place.
I agree. I'm tempted to ask, because we're not going to be moving on. to verse 81 and we're going to go line by line on verse 81. So, that's like, that's
Joe, I want to preempt this going line by line.
yeah.
Can we talk about the future of Dao De Jing?
Yes, please do. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So the thing is that, I don't want this to end. So what I want to do is I want to just change the frequency of it. Because I think we have a great community. So firstly, here is what I was thinking of. And Jason and Amon, tell me whether this makes sense. So we'll finish 81 next time. After that, we will go and finish reading of all the verses that we have not gone through, that Amon, that Jason and Amon have been working on. And then we will call it kind of completion of this main thing. And then I want to change the frequency to maybe about once a month or so we can keep doing kind of different things in Dao De Jing. We can take different themes. There are already a couple of ideas, people reading their favorite verses of Dao De Jing, what they got out of Dao De Jing. We can come up with many, many different themes. So I want to keep it going at maybe a frequency of once a month or so. That's what I was thinking of. What do you guys think? For everybody, starting with Jason and Amon, but everybody's kind of general comments, and then Jason, Amon, and Joe, and then everybody else. Jason, what do you think?
That's not a bad idea, and personally, I think it makes sense to read Confucius Analects,
okay,
as a contract. And to this point, I've been thinking about this one for a while. Okay, as a that put a very high level question. Okay, because I realize doesn't matter. Okay, how well a person in the American West world, it's also they try to find out what's the foundation, okay, of Asian culture. Just like when I 30, 40 years ago, I went to America, I thought I can speak English, but turned out a lot of things, subtle things, I don't get it. Okay, so take a while. So American doesn't have to read this part, but foreigner have to read this part. Same as the Asian culture, Chinese, Asian doesn't have to read this one, okay, because you grow with that. So, but I think that the three books probably important. I start to form this idea. One is Dao De Jing. Second is Confucius Analects. Another one is the Art of War, okay. The reason I picked these three, okay, is first, these three are very short, so it's easy to read, okay. Secondly, I think that this one represents three different personality of the Asian, okay. Confucius represent when you try to be a good person, all right. Dao De Jing teach you how to try to be a happy person, how to live your life. I don't want to say the Art of War try to teach you how to be a bad person, but I think it will try to you be successful person, okay, strategic. So I think that probably the three things people should understand. So when you were young, okay, you should read Analects, okay, so be a good person, okay, and then you start to study the Art of War. So in the business, you can fight, you can be successful, be going up to make more money, okay. Even we try not to say money is important, but we know without money, nothing is possible. So, so I think that's important. You make certain amount of money, so you can join the Zoom, and we don't worry about how much money people pay me when I talk it on the Zoom. So then when you get older, you should study the Dao De Jing. So you make sure, one day you will die, okay, and you will leave this world, and you will live happily. So I think, that probably the idea. I think it should be surrounded in the whole.
No, I love it. I love it. So would you like to do Analects next?
I would be happy to do it, but I don't know, it's
Okay.
people's interest, and then
Sure. So we'll talk about it. I will, let's discuss this offline, Jason, about how to do it, how to structure it, all of that, and so we'll definitely add it. We'll figure out a way of doing it, and I think it makes sense to do Analects next instead, and then do Art of War. So I think that's because Analects is more kind of fundamental. So I think I like that. So okay, let's talk about that. Let's figure that out. Amon, what do you think?
I think my family will be thrilled if we're doing this once a month because they won't lose me once a week.
Okay.
I would absolutely love to do this with the Analects. Though I'm really curious, Jason, if you're going to start a translation on the Analects, I'm going to have to get some other resources to be in any way a contributor for it. But I have read the Analects, I have studied them, and Jason's absolutely right. It's kind of like only reading the Federalist Papers to understand US society and neglecting the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and all the other very fundamental parts that make up, this culture. So I think Jason's absolutely right. The Analects are an absolute perfect counterpoint to the Dao De Jing. And having read the Dao De Jing like this, it'll give some context for people to be able to say, oh, that's what it was speaking against. Oh, that's what it was addressing. Whereas if you just read it on its own without ever having read the Dao De Jing, you could really get a different picture. The Art of War is absolutely a seminal Chinese text. I agree. I'm not sure if it or one of the teachings of Buddhism would be more in keeping just because they call them the three, treasures of China. But we've got all of the Analects to go through that. And if everyone wants to continue to meet up once a week to figure out how to best get Jason's translation published, I'm all for that too. And, if anyone's got a publisher on hand, let us know, because I've been thrilled doing this, but holding a print copy, well, I could just pack it all in then and say life's been successful.
I'm on that. I've been in publishing industry for the past 20 years, and I'll talk to Jason about how to do it, because it's actually a piece of cake at this point to do it. It's very, very easy. The publishing industry has changed radically, and it's actually quite easy to get a printed copy out there. So even if Jason wanted to prepare a printed copy just for you, it's very easy to do. So I'll talk to Jason about that. Joe, what do you think?
I think I agree with, the Art of War, and then I don't know much about the Analects. So it would be a new journey for me. So that's fine. That would be great. And as far as, getting Jason published, I think it would be fantastic. And it'd be interesting to see if we can go back and maybe recreate a Scribble book for the
we should do that. I'll talk to Jason,
yeah,
and we'll figure something out, because it's it's just amazing what he's done, and what he and Amon have done together here.
Yeah, and I could actually I could go through like the Dao De Jing again. I mean, I enjoyed this a lot, and I think that going through it again, I really it's not something you go through once.
Don't think of it as folks, don't think of this as either or. Okay, just because we can always, there is 24 hours in a day, and there are 7 days in a week. Okay, so we can always do things in parallel, and we can choose. We can make all kinds of choices, and there are other times where we can do other things. So just want to hear from you. what your thoughts are. So one is that I mean, even if you, for example, were to do Confucius Analects, I will still want to do Dao De Jing once a month. I'll find some time for it. That's for sure, because I think this community, I think, see, this book grows on you, and going back to it again and again. Go ahead, Amon.
I just wanted to say, having done the Dao De Jing, doing the Analects, you will see very similar themes. It won't feel like a complete departure, even though culturally they may have been at odds over the how to go about it. Many of the goals are the same. And so it really would revisit many of the same ideas in a lot of ways. And it's a great read in and of itself, because it, once again, is a teacher desperate to bring harmony to a society.
Wonderful. Jason.
Yeah, I think Amar is exactly right. Reading analytics, okay, sometimes boring. Okay, so if you but if you know,
Jason, we need to get these people back to come to the meetups. You can't tell them. This is going to be boring. It's not.
Yeah, that's right.
It's going to be like dental work.
It's recorded, so I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's boring because I think at least Taiwan, when I was growing up, we were forced to memorize it. So whenever it doesn't matter what people force you to memorize, you will label boring. But after many, many years, I take a fresh eye, okay, and forget about the government. The government, when I was in Taiwan, want to me learn, okay, just look at it in a fresh eye. Look at Confucius as a person. Don't look at him as a archbishop or the pope of the religion. Okay, just look at him as a ego, full-hearted old man. Okay, what he said. Okay, during that situation, you will start to understand the dynamics. It's not boring. You know that. And if for the people who read Dao De Jing, you will find out when Confucius talk about the sky, the heaven, it probably slightly different than what Dao De Jing talk about heaven. When you talk about moral, what you have to do, what talk about the ideal world, Confucius also have his utopia idea, which will be totally opposite than what Lao Tzu talking about. So you will see the same thing, but you probably see the opposite way. So the reason I bring up this one is I start to find out the people probably being too poor to the direction of Dao De Jing, and forget the other part of that. So actually, you only see the one part, and you can see the other part of the same thing. Okay.
No, absolutely. I love this point. So let's spend a couple of minutes on it, because I've been actually, in preparation for this to figure out whether, how to approach Analects. I've been listening to Analects, and this is just, I've not even finished it. But I'm good, like 80% of the way through. The thing that really strikes me about it is, firstly, there is this man like Confucius, and he's making these comments on day-to-day things that we need to do in practical life and how to live. Okay, and they are full of wisdom and insights and humor, and it's about daily life. So one way I would look at it is that Dao De Jing is focused on largely nature, and it is applying it to culture, whereas Confucius is focused on culture, but the nature is like the background for it. So the focus is different between culture versus nature, but the mind, there is a similarity of how it is being talked about. So that's, I've not been able to put my finger on it, what that similarity is, but there is a similarity. There is very much of a this worldliness, which is there in both Dao De Jing and and Confucius. So there is a lot of similarities. And in some ways, it's like the yin yang. You know, like, for example, when we study Bhagavad Gita in the Indian tradition, Bhagavad Gita actually brings together a lots of the themes, and it can support as a foundation for the rest. Similarly, Bible is quite a bit of a foundation for the West, for the West, sorry. So for Bhagavad Gita is a good foundation for Indian culture. But Dao De Jing is not. Only in side by side with Confucius, it can be thought of as a foundation, because it's like the yin yang play that operates between the two, which is, for me, it's, you know, throughout the Chinese society, Chinese way of thinking, you can't really do it. You can't understand the Chinese mind just with Dao De Jing. So I think Jason is absolutely right that, you know, you need to know Confucius in order to fully appreciate how Dao De Jing is integrated into the Chinese society, because that is the missing, otherwise it's the missing part. It's the elephant that did not speak, or some such thing. Joe.
Yeah, no, this is something that's interesting to me, because after going through the series of the 3 spheres, that this will actually bring us some context as to current date, where we covered China pretty closely, and currently how China views nature. It was covered in that series. So understanding Confucius would actually be very helpful in understanding modern day China. But they also talked about Taoist principles in that too. So
Okay.
I think we gotta, but somehow we have to still keep the Tao.
Yeah, we'll do. So one commitment is that we'll definitely do one Dao De Jing meetup per month.
Okay.
One way or the other. We'll figure out a way of doing that. Okay. Second is that we will do Confucius and Alex. I'll work out the details with Jason, how to do it, what time. The third is that next one. Now, given that Dao De Jing is going to continue and Confucius needs to start, next time we'll wrap up 81. So it doesn't go line by line. And then immediately after that, I want to celebrate by reading the remaining poems, remaining verses by Jason and Amon. And then we'll look at
in the same session.
Was that? No, not same session, separate session. 81. So you will have a whole session. You can drag out 81
okay,
for
good.
Entire 2 hours.
Good.
Okay, but 2 hours. And then we go to listening to all of them together. All right, so that's what does anybody else have any comments about this strategy of, what do you guys think about doing Dao De Jing once a month, continuing with it? What do you think about doing Confucius? Any thoughts, any comments anybody has? You're welcome to type exclamation mark. Margarita, what do you think?
I think I agree. After we finish chapter 81 and a review, and we can start with the analysis. I placed this website, confucius.org. Probably that's where I can find in Bahasa, the reliable source. And there are several languages there. So perhaps any of you can also use that. Perhaps Jason doesn't have to, and Amon don't have to translate one by one, because that's going to take so much time. Perhaps we can use this resource to have a good discussion about the essence. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I mean, I think, okay, thank you. Really appreciate that. And Jason, if you have any kind of recommendations about translations, both Jason and Amon, you can go ahead and give that. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, let me talk about the translation on the analect. Analect is double the size. Dao De Jing is about 5,000 characters. Analect is about 10,000 characters. So it's double. I believe, I didn't do it, but I believe translation is easier because if you look at all Margarita, you probably read all different translations. Probably doesn't have much difference, okay, from different translation, because it's a so-called canon or orthodox teaching. So, and then again, analect is dialogue, right, between Confucius and then the student. So you know who spoke, the speaker and the listener. So it eliminates many things. So only thing you have to dive through the original text and figure out what they mean. So it's supposed to be easier. I don't know. I just say supposed to be easier.
No, that makes sense. I mean, it's Dao De Jing is poetic, and it is so rich in its poetry, in its metaphors, in what it is trying to do with each verse. Comparatively, Confucius is prose. It is describing things of daily life. It is a lot more easier to handle. All right. Does anybody else have any comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay. We talked about that these poems were not necessarily well ordered, that they were lots of times in disarray. I've been really curious if we could sit down and think about a way to look to see if we could find order, in the poems, like to see if there's another story being told, if we reorder them, if we understand the Tao in a different way. I know that would be a humongous amount of work. I mean, I don't know if you can begin by doing like sort of keywords or, phrase searches or word searches that would begin to, maybe place some order to it. But I would be fascinated to see if there was such a way of doing it and really looking into it now. But like I said, it's a deep dive.
Thank you. Next, thank you. Aman, what do you think?
Actually, what Laura says, I've been sort of rattling in the back of my mind as we've been going through, and there's a very interesting tie into wuxing, sort of 5-element transformation theory that exists as we go through the poems, as we go chapter by chapter. That is a way of thematically linking them. So many stand out as being connected to water, but there are many that mention wood, which is also one of the 5 wuxing transformation phases. There's times where weapons or coin are talked about, which could be construed as metals. There are times where the earth is brought up. That's one way of thematically sort of attaching one chapter to another. And it would be fascinating to do that when I have a print copy in my hand that I can actually go through with a highlighter. I might do that. As far as the analects go, Jason's right. It's not quite the challenge that the Dao De Jing is, because it doesn't sort of plop out of existence as an enigma, which the Dao De Jing kind of does. It doesn't have anything before it that looks like it, and after it takes centuries before you get the Chuangzi and a whole sort of range of literature. But the analects are just part of a continuous sort of evolution of scholarship in China. The one thing I would say about the analects is that translations aren't as problematic, but knowing the cast of characters could actually make a difference, because these dialogues between Confucius and his pupils, knowing who these pupils are, and there's an obvious favorite and there's an obvious dunce, and they are pointed at again and again and again throughout the text as, oh, he does it so well, he's such an idiot. And it's really kind of unabashed, but keeping that straight could be valuable, to just have like a cast list to go by. I'm not personally going to generate it, but it would have helped me the first time I read through the analects.
Yeah, Phil, who does the Dostoevsky meetup, he has this nice little diagram which keeps track of all the characters in the book, and he talks through them using that map. And when I think about ordering of Dao De Jing, I think it won't be a linear order. The logical thing that fits, that comes to my mind is actually a diagram of all these 81 points with lots of connections between them. Some kind of towards the center, some on one side. There are these lines running from one to another. So it will be like a Chinese character at the end, a complex Chinese character with 81 nodes that are connected in certain way is how I'm thinking of if I wanted to organize it. Sequence is not how the Chinese mind kind of works, and it's not being presented as a sequence. It has connections going through, but they're kind of, two-way connections. It's like some kind of, it's giving an idea of this is going to happen, and then there are common themes and they're coming back to it and adding certain other themes that are connected. So I think a visual diagram is what I think would be a best way of capturing it if you wanted to organize it.
I have to consider the humanistic side of it too.
I am leaving. Good night, all.
Right. Good
It was
night.
Great
Thank
seeing
you,
you.
Aman.
Good night.
Hopefully,
Thank you.
I'll see
Good
you
night.
soon.
Yes, next week.
All right. All right, Jason. So I'll talk to you. I'll send you email, and we'll figure out the details. But we are fixed for the next two Dao De Jing meetups next 2 weeks, and after that we'll figure out the schedule for that. A schedule for monthly Dao De Jing as well as Confucius. In Confucius, it makes sense in doing it on a weekly basis. We'll have to figure out how many and stuff like that because it's a serious endeavor. And we will make sure that it will be extremely exciting. The boring comes only from the fact that people are made to read it, are forced to read it. Anything can be made boring. It's a very simple tool. You just make people read something, however magnificent, when they don't want to do it, and it can become boring. So we'll figure out a way of making it.
Analog has 19 books. So if you do it like 4 each time, right? So it's about the same size, the same day. We will last the same day.
Perfect. So we'll do 19 sessions. I think that's good.
Well, no, I think 19 is probably too much, right? Probably, but not enough for 2 hours each book. So probably 2 sections per book, right? That's probably the size, yeah.
So 19 into 2?
Yeah, 19 times 2, that would be 38 sections.
Okay,
that's I kind of figure out. Yeah.
That's fine. We'll figure out a schedule and let's do that. Joe, you had something?
I was just going to say he could make everybody memorize it as a way of getting back at everybody that he had to memorize it. Jason,
well, we will
require us to memorize it.
This is not talk chamber, Joe. That's not what we do here.
No, I will have everybody memorize in English and in Chinese before you can talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Who invited you here, Jason?
One person probably know it. The pin probably can memorize all things.
Yeah, and memory is not that like in the Indian tradition, they memorize Rigved, which is like when piled up about this high. Wow. Okay, and that's what people that's like being learned. So Alex learning is not, but then you have to set it to these verses. So it's easy to memorize. All right. So Joe, do you want to wrap up?
Yes. No, I just want to say thank you to everyone. And next week, Penny, Brian, Vanique, bring your best lines because we're going to be covering it for 2 hours.
I have one more thing. I want to tell you about the meetups coming up.
Oh, yes.
Okay, I'm going to do one of the most ambitious meetups I've ever done on Thursday. I'm going to take Bhagavad Gita. I have this nice little diagram that summarizes Bhagavad Gita. And I'm going to put John 1 in it. I'm going to read through John 1 and I'm going to map that into Bhagavad Gita. So it's going to be very, very complex, very, very difficult thing. I don't know whether I'll succeed, but I'm going to certainly try. And it's going to be very exciting. So don't miss that. That's going to be on Thursday. The purpose of that is that people are familiar with the Bible and to see the commonality. As well as, so first part would be just to show the commonality and show the immense beauty of John 1. And the second part would be to see the distinctions. How is New Testament different from Bhagavad Gita? What are the key ways in which it is different. It's a very difficult thing to do. I don't understand either Bhagavad Gita or Bible. I understand it just a little bit here and there. So I'm going to try to make the observations. So that's coming up on Thursday. On Friday, we are going to continue with Bhagavad Gita on, we've got Mike doing a meetup on your comfort zone on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. On the weekend, we've got just one meetup. We've got Mark Stallman doing on Sunday. We've got Sunday 3 p.m. We've got a meetup on
Victor Guy, isn't it Victor Gaitan?
yes,
Yes.
gentleman called Victor Gaitan, who actually is biggest authority on the, this is very odd, you know, I didn't expect to have this. He's going to be talking about what Vatican has been doing in diplomacy in the Russia and Ukraine, and what kind of diplomacy that Vatican can do over history. That's what he's written about, and he's going to be applying it. He's going to be talking about what's happening in Ukraine and this one. So it's a, you know, really going to be very interesting. So that's what is coming up. And on Monday, we are going to be going back to our poetry meetups. So looking forward to that. All right.
Is that all for the weekend?
On the weekend, actually, we've finished our Fountainhead series.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. I forgot. Yes, Fountainhead, we are doing it at 5 o'clock. At 5 p.m., we're doing Fountainhead on Sunday. On Sunday. All right.
Okay.
And wait a minute, Jason has something. Jason, what do you have this weekend?
Oh, this weekend we do the Chinese legalism, right? So it's a very different historical view, you know. So it's we call it Machiavellian in China. So,
The Machiavelli of China.
Yeah.
And that's going to be Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, all Eastern times. All right, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you guys.
Thank you,
Good
Joe.
night,
Thank you,
everyone.
Jason. Thank you, Shri Khan.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.